this up on the website yesterday, so I thought I'd just quickly show it in class. So this is exactly how the prizes for the home league on PokerStars will work. I don't know how many of you guys care about this. I posted it on the website, so this is what the prizes are. So this is the list. In terms of specific details, who is Cole South, who is Tom Marchese, etc. I posted links to most of these people's Wikipedia pages on their website, or you can just Google, it shouldn't be hard to find. So the coachings is like a virtual coaching where these pros, they usually run this service where they'll either watch you play for an hour or let you watch them play for an hour, and they'll talk to you one-on-one. They can either watch you play and figure out your leagues, figure out the places where they don't think you're making the best decisions, or you can watch them play, and they'll explain their thought processes very clearly. The card runner subscriptions are this is a poker training website where pros, including myself, will make videos of ourselves playing and talking at the same time. So a subscription means you get access to the entire database of over 2,000 videos for whatever the length of time is. And then there's the signed items, which is there's books, there's DVDs. They're all signed by the original authors who were kind enough to donate these prizes to the class. So are there any questions of what these prizes are? Okay, so I hope you guys are excited about them. Most of them are pretty high big name pros, pretty good prizes. So the rules will be, there's 24 prizes in total in the above lists. So how it'll work is the top 20 in points will get prizes. The first place will get 2 prizes, and players can choose prizes in descending rank. And the first to pick can't choose 2 prizes from the same category, so they can't pick a 6 months card runner subscription plus a 4 month subscription, or they can't take the signed indie block DVD and the signed little 10 book. You have to pick from 2 different categories. And then, so after that, that's 21 prizes given out. The remaining 3 prizes will be given to the 3 players with the highest points per game who have not already received a prize. And you're only eligible for the average points per game prizes if you've played at least 10 games and haven't already received a prize. So there's going to be additional tournaments this week, and tournaments will end officially on the night of the day before the last class. And so prizes will be handed out on the last class. And so I hope you can be there. If you're not going to be here, you can either consider donating your prize to the next person or telling me what you want, and I'll try to get what you want for you. Because on the last class, everyone's going to come, and then I'm going to say, first place, come up, pick your 2 prizes, then the next person pick your prizes. So if you're going to win a prize, which you should know by the night of the day before, you should come to class sort of prepared of what you want. I don't want people spending 5 minutes picking their prize. And as far as coaching, the in-person coaching with Mike and myself, that's going to happen either Wednesday or Thursday this week. We're going to have a special tournament where the person who knocks us out of the tournament gets the hour coaching from us. So that'll happen sometime this week, and this will be in-person coaching. So either we can meet somewhere on campus or whatever, and we can watch you play and give you coaching. So are there any questions about the prizes? Okay, cool. I hope people are excited. So next class, Mike is going to come down, and Mike is going to teach the next class. And then the last class, we'll sort of be up here together, and we'll just give out prizes and also talk about a few important things in the last class. So, a few more announcements. Okay, so I put up a reading that on the website that you were welcome to read if you wanted to. It's from one of the prize books. It's called Readings from Building a Bankroll. So it sort of goes with what I'm going to talk about this class on postflop, turn and river play. Okay. So a few more things. If you can subscribe or thumbs up my YouTube videos, I appreciate that a lot. I don't plan on making money from this, don't worry. But so also this Thursday night will be your last chance to get 10 points necessary to pass the course. So this is sort of on the other end of the scale. If you don't already have 10 points, so you should try to start playing more tournaments now. I will be fairly lenient and let basically most people who don't have 10 points pass the course, but you should try to get in something like 15 tournaments, you know, like if you know, because like I said, on average, you're supposed to earn 1 point per tournament you play. So if you only played like 3 tournaments and you don't have 10 points, it's hard for me to pass you because, you know, you just like if I myself played 3 tournaments, I don't think the chances that I could get 10 points is that high. So, I mean like, so, you know, try to play 15 tournaments you can. Try to play at least 10 tournaments. If you play at least 10 tournaments and write a report, then I'll pass you. If you play less than 10 tournaments and don't have 10 points, then things will be a bit iffy. But like there's 6 tournaments a day. There's going to be even more than 6 tournaments on the last couple of days. So, you know, if you don't have 10 points yet, you really got to get playing, and it shouldn't be hard to play 10 tournaments. Really, I hope it's not a high stress situation for people, but I really want you to get some games in. Okay, so I'm going to get started. Are there any questions about this administrative stuff with prizes or like passing? Yeah.
What happens if you are my special? No, you ask.
Oh, okay. We'll explain that. Okay, so like if one of us wins and the person who comes second knocks us out, and like if I knock Mike out, then the person who knocks me out gets like both coachings. So okay, we'll figure it out. Okay, so in this class, I'm going to give more examples on postflop play, especially turn and river play. So before, we mostly only covered like how to play draws when I talked about implied odds. And like I remember there was a day where I gave examples of when you can get all the money in on the flop. So turn and river play happen less frequently than flop play because often you're going to get it all in pre-flop or all in by the flop, so you're not going to be playing the turn and river that frequently. But the thing is, when you do, the pots will be bigger, right? Because the pots grow exponentially. So the pots will be bigger, which means even though you don't play turns and rivers that frequently, so mistakes on the turn and river are more costly. You make up for the fact that you don't get there as frequently because the bets are bigger because the pot is bigger. So all the examples today will be using a 6-handed cash game instead of a tournament setting. So the reason we do this is because in cash games, players will have at least 100 big blinds usually, which means there's more opportunity to get to turn and river play. Whereas in tournaments, when you only have 20 big blinds, often you're going to be all in pre-flop or on the flop. So it's less likely that you'll get to a turn or river decision. So just for a change, but overall it's still the same, like right? It's still you're trying to maximize your money or maximize your chips. The principles are still the same, just the setting will look slightly different. So the setting will look something like this. So the blinds, instead of being like 50, 100 or something, they'll be 1, 2, and instead of chips, these will be like real dollars. And people usually have like $200, so 100 big blinds. So okay, so this class I'm not going to have that many examples. There's going to be lots of theory, as a contrast to the last class where there was practically no theory. But okay, so let's just look at a hand first. So this is a standard bet for value hand where you can bet. So we get ace king under the gun 6-handed. So it's under the gun is the same as hijack -1 in this case, right? Because there's 4 players into the button. So we raise with ace king, and both blinds call. So they both check to us, and we obviously hit a good flop. So we bet 13, and the small blind calls, and the big blind folds. Okay, so the turn puts 3 clubs out there, and the small blind checks, and we bet $30 into $44 in this case. Okay, so now we're going to stop and discuss the hand. So one thing is, remember how I used to say bet half pot? I said in tournaments, bet half pot. But in this case, in both scenarios, we get more than half the pot. We bet 13 into 18 on the flop, and 30 into 44 on the turn. So the bet half pot rule, I think I said this before too, but I just want to emphasize it again, is it's only good if we're shallow enough, or we have few enough big blinds, such that we can get all the money in by the river without having to bet more than pot. So if you only start the hand with 40 big blinds, you can probably do this by betting half pot, and on the river you're only going to have half the pot, and you're going to get all the money. But in this case, it's not true, right? The pot, if we only bet half pot, so let's see, so if it starts 18, we bet 9, and then the pot will be 36, then we bet 18, then the pot will be 72, then we bet 36. So like, that's only going to be about like 60 or something, and we have a total of $200. So usually in cash games, when players bet, you're betting more than half the pot. You're usually betting somewhere like 3/4 of the pot, something like that, because you want to bloat the pot, you want to win more money, you want the pot to be more significant, basically. So usually you want to bet bigger. Okay, so the second issue is, are we afraid of a flush when we bet the turn? So the answer is yes, he could have a flush, but there's a good chance he would have raised the flush draw on the flop, so this reduces the chances somewhat. So nonetheless, my plan is to bet here and fold to a raise. So whenever you bet, you should always ask yourself what I'm going to do if you get raised. You should always have a plan in mind when you bet of how you're going to react to potential raises, especially in cases where you're in position. So like if you check, you would have seen a river card for free, right? So if you're going to bet, you make yourself susceptible to getting raised. So you should definitely have a plan for how you're going to react to a raise. So in this case, so there's a few principles that are good to play by. So you shouldn't put all your money in a singly raised pot with one pair. What I mean by singly raised pot is a pot where just one person raised and people called. So like you raised to $6 here and he called, there wasn't a re-raise pre-flop. Usually you shouldn't be putting all your money in post-flop with one pair in that case. So like you don't want to put in 3 big blinds pre-flop and 97 big blinds post-flop with one pair. And the second point is getting raised on the turn or river is a lot scarier than getting raised on the flop, because on the flop, lots of speculative hands or like weak draws can still be raising you just to like test the waters, just to see what's going on. But on the turn or river, with fewer turns left to come, people are less likely to have a speculative hand and more likely to have a real hand. And the third principle is sort of don't call turn raise when you could be drawing dead, which in this case we could be, right? Because we only have one pair. So if he has a flush, we're drawing dead. If he has pocket fours, we're drawing dead. If he has 3-5, a straight, we're drawing dead. So those are some principles to remember. They're kind of general, but I just wanted to emphasize that we should have a plan when we bet. Okay, so anyways, he calls the turn. So fortunately, he doesn't raise, he just calls, which leads us to believe that we have the best hand, and we should continue value betting on the river, right? So value betting means betting where you're hoping the other guy calls you with the weaker hand. So the third club is actually not a bad card for us in some cases, because it forces him to put in more money with one pair plus club hands. So like if he has pocket 8s with the 8 of clubs, or like pocket 10s with the 10 of clubs, he probably can't fold this turn because, you know, he has a decent pair and he has a flush draw. Whereas if he had pocket 8s and the turn was the 9 of hearts, then there's a good chance he would fold because there's 2 cards higher than him. So, right, and if a 4th club comes in the river, so when we bet, we should also sort of have a river plan. So most likely we're going to be betting on the river again because we have the highest pair with the highest possible card to go with it, which is called the kicker, the highest possible kicker. But if a 4th club comes in the river, we shouldn't be putting in any more money. So, okay, so the river is the 2 of diamonds, and he checks, and we bet again. And he calls, and he has ace-jack with the ace of clubs. So the summary is, so we extracted a lot of value from one pair by betting on all streets and betting big, right? If we bet small, we wouldn't have won this much money from ace-jack on this board. This is why it's important to bet big. We won a lot more because we bet more than half the pot. So betting somewhere like 3/4 of the pot is decent when you have 100 big blinds. And I think our opponent's play is pretty good. I mean, maybe he could have folded the river, but I think he mostly just got unlucky. So it's always good to also put yourself in your opponent's shoes each hand and see, you know, would I have played the hand the same as him if I was him? And he's definitely not folding the turn with the ace of clubs, where he can hit the best possible flush. So I think his play is fine. And I think in this situation, the worst hand I would have done this with is maybe ace queen. With ace jack, if I bet the river, I don't think he's going to call me with the worst hand that frequently, so I probably would have just checked the river or like checked the turn and bet the river or something. So another important thing to keep in mind is if I raise from the button instead of under the gun, then I probably would bet ace jack. So I said in this situation I wouldn't bet ace jack for value because I don't think he's calling the worst hand that frequently. But if I raise from the button and he's safe out from the big blind, then maybe ace jack is okay because my range is a lot weaker when I open from the button. And I have a lot more bad hands in my range, which means a hand like ace jack that's pretty good is relatively stronger. But when I raise from under the gun, since I have so many good hands in my range, ace jack relatively is weaker, which means he's not going to call me that frequently. So, okay, so the important thing to sort of figure out when you have a lot of bets post-flop is, so usually in tournaments, you're either getting the money all in post-flop or you're not getting the money all in post-flop, right? So that's usually the only decision you have to make in tournaments because you usually don't have that many big blinds. But when you have a lot of big blinds, like when you have 100 big blinds or more, 200 big blinds, you're basically never going to hit a board unless you hit like a full house or better. You're not going to have a board where you want to put all 200 big blinds in post-flop. So it's good to always have a sense of how many big blinds you're willing to put in post-flop before you fold. Because almost always the answer is never going to be all of your money. It's very hard to hit a hand where you're willing to put in all of your money post-flop. So as you can see in this case, we put in about $120. So the way you usually think about it is how many times am I betting? Is my hand good enough to bet the flop, bet the turn, and bet the river? Or is it good enough to only bet the flop and bet the turn? Or equivalently bet the flop and bet the river? Or like, is my hand only good enough to bet once? So a general rule of thumb is the best possible one-pair hand is usually you can bet it 3 times for value, but only the best possible one-pair hand. So, like I said in this case, if I had ace jack, I probably wouldn't have done this 3 times unless I thought my opponent was going to call me with a very weak hand. Okay, so let's look at a similar hand where I have ace 10 under the gun here, and I raise. And this is probably the weakest offsuit ace I raise, by the way, so I probably wouldn't open.
Yeah. And if the small blind shove after your raise and river, would you have folded?
You're getting exceptionally good odds, but it would be really close. It would basically come down to a read, I think it would come down to a read. So, like, you would be getting exceptionally good odds, right? Because you bet 70 and he would only raise to 151. So, it would, the thing is, it doesn't make sense for him to have that many strong hands in this case, I would say, because I think, like, I think his play is almost thin with a flush, because like full house is beautiful. So like even if he had a flush, I don't know if he would be doing this with the hopes of me calling with a weaker hand. So I think if he's going to go all in, he either has a bluff, which is not that likely, or he's got to have an exceptionally strong hand, like pocket folds, like he's got to have a full house or something. So I'd probably fold if in general, I usually fold to a river raise because I don't think people bluff that much. So but basically you're only beating a bluff for sure. But it doesn't make sense for him to have that many good hands in his range because I don't think he's going to play a flush like this. I think he would like raise the turn with the flush because on the river he's not that comfortable with the flush on the river. So okay. So yes, that was pretty in-depth analysis. So this hand I'm gonna try to go through a lot of hypotheticals and there won't be as many examples. So It'll be less exciting, but hopefully educational. Okay, so we raise with ace 10 offsuit, small blind calls, big blind folds. Okay, and the flop is ace of diamonds, 9 of clubs, 8 of clubs. So it's a similar situation, except for the only difference is our hand is a lot weaker because we only have ace 10. And the flop is a bit scarier because instead of it being the 2-4 clubs, it's the 9-8 clubs. Oops. Sorry. So, okay, so we're going to check here. I decided to check here. Okay, so why do we check? So I think betting is not terrible, but checking is good for a few reasons. So I don't think betting is a terrible thing. But the difference here is, first of all, our hand is not good enough to bet the flop, bet the turn, bet the river, right? Remember what I said. I said only if you have the best possible hand pre-flop, best possible one-pair hand pre-flop, you can bet 3 times. So usually that's a good rule of thumb. So usually you need either the best possible one-pair hand, so either ace-king on an ace-high board, or pocket aces on like a jack-high board, or like ace-jack on a jack-high board. So usually you need a hand that's either 2-pair or better, or the best possible one-pair hand you bet 3 times. So with a hand like ace 10, unless we hit a 10 or hit a second ace or something, we probably can't bet 3 times for value. So with ace king, the reason why we have to bet the flop is because our hand is good enough to bet 3 times for value. So if we check the flop, then we missed an opportunity to bet, right? Then we can't bet 3 times. But with ace 10, it's okay because we can check the flop and still bet the turn and bet the river. So that's one reason why checking is okay. Second reason is there's a lot more draws in his range this time. So like jack 10 or even queen 10, whereas before when it was ace 2-4, people aren't going to call it 5-6 or 5-7 or whatever that frequently. So there's a lot more draws in his range this time, like clubs, jack 10, 10-7, even like queen 10, a 4-out straight draw, could do something funny and check raise us as a bluff. And we'd have to full do a raise because, not only is he check raising with bluffs, he's also going to have good hands when he check raises. He's going to have 2 pairs, he's going to have pocket 8s, pocket 9s, the occasional ace king that, occasionally he'll have ace king, but not that frequently because I expect him to re-raise ace king pre-flop. And the third reason for betting is, the third reason for checking is there's not like a higher card that can come on the turn because we already hit a pair of aces. So if the flop was 10-9-8, then betting would seem a lot more reasonable because if the flop was 10-9-8, like the turn can be a jack, a queen, a king, or a jack, a queen, or a king, and all 3 of those cards aren't good for you. But when it's ace 9-8, that's not the case. So when you have something like ace 10, there's a big difference between the flop coming 10-5-2 and the ace 5-2. There's a difference between hitting the 10 and hitting the ace. In both cases, you have a good hand, but when the high card is the 10, then your hand is vulnerable. A jack, king, or a queen can come and ruin your hand, whereas if the high card is the ace, you're a lot less vulnerable. Although you're more likely to be beat because he can have ace jack or ace queen. Whereas if the flop came 10-5-2, you only lose to like pocket jacks, and there's fewer combinations of that. Okay, so we check. I think betting is okay, by the way. I think betting is fine, but I think checking is slightly better. And he bets the turn, and we call. So the turn was fairly good for us, and we could consider raising to charge draws and we see the river. So once again, I call here, but I think raising is okay because there's lots of draws, there's clubs, there's diamonds, and there's lots of straight draws that, we want to price them, we want to make them pay more to see the river. So calling is decent. So raising is decent because we charge them more to see the river. But I think for every time you charge a draw successfully to see the river, you also risk putting in more money when you're losing. Like, there's no reason he doesn't have ace 8 here, right? Because like if he had ace 8, it's not like his play is consistent with his line. Like if he had ace 8, he's not going to beat the flop. He he would often still check the flop to us because we were the pre-flop raiser. So it definitely makes sense when we have ace-8 here, and or like pocket eights or something really good. So, and you know, by calling, we can still bet to river if he checks. So we're not really losing a bet. We can still bet to river if he checks, or like call a safe river if he bets. So we can still get more money in on the river, and that's fine because we only wanted to get in 2 streets anyway. So usually when you say bet the flop, bet the turn, bet the river, that means 3 streets. If you're only betting twice, it means 2 streets. So with a hand like this, our goal is to only get in 2 streets. So there's no need to raise now because we can bet later and still get in 2 streets. So yeah.
You said that you should always check to the pre-flop raiser, at least at the beginning. And in this case, you check as a pre-flop raiser, and then the other guy raised.
Yeah.
How does this work after the pre-flop raiser checks? We should still go after him, or we should just raise, or what's the problem?
Oh, okay. So I think before I said usually it's standard to check to the pre-flop raiser because the pre-flop raiser can have really good hands in his range, like pocket aces, whereas the pre-flop caller can't. So, but after the pre-flop raiser checks behind, then like anything can go on the turn. There's no reason you got to check him again because he would have bet pocket aces probably or whatever. So there's no like if the small blind has a good hand on this turn, he's got to bet it because he can't afford to check again and miss another opportunity to put money in. But the reason why you check on the flop usually is because they're like you bet on the flop anyway, so you can usually just check raise them if you have a good hand.
And during the turn, we should also check the pre-flop raiser if you raised after the flop, or it's also whatever.
It's sort of whatever you want to do, but often checking is still good. Like the first hand that I talked about, this ace-king hand, where we had ace-king and we bet the flop. And if he had a flush here, I think checking to us is pretty good because it's likely we'll bet again and then he can check raise us. So usually like checking is still fine if they bet the flop, but yeah, so like it's hard to answer it generally, it really depends. Okay. So, right, so we call here, and so he bets 20 on the river, and the river is kind of dangerous. The river completes diamonds. It gives diamonds a flush. It gives Jack 10 a straight. He bets, but we still call. So the river isn't great for us, but you know he could be bluffing like missed clubs, or he could be value betting ace X. So he could be value betting an ace with a small card, a hand that's worse than us. So, right. So when you analyze your opponent's bet, you shouldn't put them on random hands. Remember, the purpose of every bet is either a bluff or a value bet, which means a bluff means he's trying to get you to fold a better hand, or a value bet means he's trying to get you to call a worse hand. So every bluff is one or the other. So when you're analyzing your opponent's bet and figuring out what he could have, you should figure out whether he's bluffing or he's value betting. So the reason I call is because he could be bluffing, which means I always beat him because he's not going to bluff a hand that's better than ace 10. But even more, there's some chance he's value betting, like ace 6. Like he could have ace 6 here and think that his hand is good and be betting and hoping he calls with a queen or a 9 or something. So I definitely call here, and so notice here, it's also important on boards like this to recognize when your kicker plays. So in this case, my best 5-card hand is ace, ace, queen, 10, 9, right? So I actually beat ace deuce. But if I had like ace 7 here, then I would probably still call, but I would be a lot less happy about it because if I had ace 7, I tie ace 2, right? Because ace 2 also has ace, ace, queen, 9, 8 as their best 5-card hand. And ace 7 also has ace, ace, queen, 9, 8 as their best 5-card hand. So it is important to pay attention to whether your kicker, which is your non-ace card, whether it's relevant. But anyway, so we call, and we do win that pot against 10-7 of clubs. So imagine what would have happened if we bet the flop. If we bet the flop, he definitely would have raised with his monster draw, right? With his 15 out draw. And and we probably would have folded, and we wouldn't have won the pot. He would have won the pot with this really good draw. So this sort of shows one advantage of checking. I mean, if he happens to have 10-7 clubs, then yeah, checking is better, but this is exactly a situation where checking is good. Yeah, hey.
What size bet are you going over? Like, you bet about half pot, or you bet like the pot, a little over that?
If you bet the pot, if you bet the pot, it's a lot scarier, but I would probably still end up calling. But if you bet the pot, I would probably fold like e7, I'd say. Yeah, but usually trying to read too much into bet sizing is, I usually don't advise it that much. I usually think just treat a bet as a bet unless the bet is, especially small. Like if the bet is like a third of the pot, then you can treat it differently. Or if the bet is like more than the pot, you can treat it differently. But usually treating bets from 3/4 pot to the pot size is one size is fine. Yeah, it's a bit more complicated, but that's not a great general rule, but it's hard for me to get into it without saying that as a general rule. Okay. Okay, so yeah, had we bet the flop, our opponent definitely would have check raised for value. And so I think this hand our opponent played well. So I think, he going for the check raise on the flop is definitely good with his monster hand. And betting the turn is definitely a good idea for him because on the turn, he has 7 high, he has 10 high, so he definitely wants to bluff us off a lot of hands. And also he builds the pot by betting the turn for the rivers that he does hit. It allows him to make a larger value bet on the river if he bets the turn. And the river is definitely a good bluff for him because remember what I said, when you have a draw and you don't hit your draw, good rivers to bluff are cards that complete other draws, right? So he had a club draw and a straight draw where he needed a jack or a 6. But the queen completed not only the diamond draw, it also completed the jack 10 draw. So he can definitely represent one of those other draws. So it's a great card for the bluff. So I think our opponent played well, and yeah, so I think both players in this hand played well. Okay, so next example. So we raise from the hijack with pocket 8s, and the button calls, and everyone else folds. Okay, and the flop is jack 6-5, and we do continuation bet here. So why do we continuation bet here? So reasons for betting. So we had a similar strength hand in the last hand, where we had ace 10 on an ace 9 8 board. I'd say pocket 8s on a jack 6-5 board is similarly strong, maybe slightly weaker. But why do we bet here instead of? But in the last case, I said checking was better. So the biggest factor is, in this case, more overcards could come and destroy our hand. So in the ace 10 case, there wasn't a card that could come that was a higher pair than the ace, because the ace is the highest possible pair. But in this case, a queen, a king, an ace, a 10, a 9 are all not great cards for our hand. So even though our hand is similarly strong, there's a lot more scary turns that can come. So we don't really want to get to that turn. So we bet. So also, we're out of position this time. So that's a very important thing to realize. So even if we check, we don't automatically advance for the turn, right? Another advantage of checking when you're in position, which means you're last to act, is by checking, your opponent doesn't get to check raise you. You deny your opponent a check raising opportunity. You get to see the turn for sure. But in this case, even if we check, he can still bet because he's the button. So we're out of position this time. So even if we check, he can still bet, which means, so one thing about continuation betting is you should be way more likely to want a continuation bet when you're out of position. So because when you're out of position, if you check, he can bet anyway. Whereas if you're in position, if you bet, you actually give him an opportunity to raise that he otherwise wouldn't have had if you checked. So yes, there are draws like 7-8 and 7-9 or diamonds here that could raise us if we bet, and we would have to fold our hand. But I mean, there really is no choice. the first two factors are just too overwhelming. So he calls our bet, and the turn is the 10 of spades. So we can't really do much on the 10 of spades here. So with pocket eights, when there's two cards like this, probably, you know, so I would, so probably we're definitely not, we definitely can't bet for value. Our hand's definitely not good enough to get 3 streets of value. But getting 2 streets is maybe possible if the river is really friendly, if the river is like a 2. But if the river is anything higher than an 8, then even getting 2 streets of value is asking for too much. Just the fact that we got money in on the flop is basically enough. So at this point in the hand, our goal is basically checking and trying to see a showdown, more or less. So like our hand's not good enough that we actually want to put money in. We just want to see a showdown. Hopefully we see the showdown before we get bluffed off the hand. But unfortunately, we check the turn and he bets 23 at the turn. So we just fold. So the analysis is, even though our pair of 8s is not bad on this turn, the implied odds on the river are terrible. So pocket 8s on this turn is not bad. You know, we could be beating him. We probably have direct equity to call. But the problem is, even when we call, we still have to play the river. And lots of scary cards that can come in the river, right? Any spade completes a flush, any diamond completes a flush. Lots of hearts, like 9s, queens, kings, aces are all scary cards, and we don't know what to do. So he's in position. So, you know, on the river, when we check, he can always bet. And we're going to make lots of mistakes. You know, often if the river's a king, he can bluff like ace-9, and we're going to fold the better hand. Or like, you know, even if the river is like a 2, he can bet his ace-jack, and we're going to call his hand. So we're basically just going to make a lot of mistakes on the river. So our implied odds are terrible, so we just fold. Because the only chances we actually hit a good river is by hitting an 8, and there's only 2 of those. So this signifies how important position is when you're in position. So, how important position is when you have a lot of big blinds. So in tournaments, when you got it all in pre-flop, position like didn't matter because you weren't playing post-flop. But when you have 100 big blinds and you got to make a lot of flop decisions, turn decisions, river decisions, position is so important. So look at all the suboptimal things that could have happened only because we were out of position. So we were forced to bet the flop basically because by checking he could bet anyway. So basically we had to bet the flop because we were out of position. If we were in position, then we maybe still would have bet, but betting is a lot worse. So, you know, by being out of position, we're just forced to bet on the flop often. And also, our opponent can raise the flop with a lot of weak draws, and we have to fold an overwhelming majority of the time. And on the turn, we basically have to fold to his bet because we were out of position, right? If we were in position this hand, he might have checked the turn to us because he thought, oh, he might go for the check raise on the turn. He might think that we were going to bet the turn. So if we were in position, he might have checked the turn, and then we could have checked the turn, and then we would have seen the river for free. But because we were out of position, after we checked, he saw that we checked so that he could bet, and then we folded. So he won the pot a lot. He basically won the pot because of position. We lost the pot because we were out of position. He bet the turn after he saw that we checked, and we had no choice but to fold because, you know, even if we call, we have to also play the river out of position. So position is exceptionally important when you have 100 big blinds because you just get to make better decisions on the flop, on the turn, and on the river, which is very important when most of the money is going to go in on the turn and on the river. Okay, so the next hand, I think, okay, so I'm going to take a break here. Because, yeah, I'm going to take a break here. I'll start again in